Three. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Fantasy Book Critic video podcast. My name is Mihir Wanchoo, and joining me today is a very special author of ours. I first got introduced to him nearly 11 years ago, back in 2011, when I first came across his book, Ex-Heroes, when it was published by a Permitted Press. It was a wild ride, and the best way to describe it in my mind is The Walking Dead meets the Justice League or Avengers, and with a hint of David Gemmell's Legend. It was a fantastic book that launched this series called the Ex-Heroes, and in late 2013 was when Crown Publishing picked up Peter Clines on the US side, and I believe it was picked up on the UK side as well. And then since then, Peter Clines has gone on to publish more than 12 books, 5 books in the Ex-Hero series, 4 books in the Threshold series, and a couple of standalones, including his most recent one, The Broken Room via Blackstone Publishing. And he also has a short story collection called Junkie Quatrain, which was first, I believe, published as an Audible and then came out with an audiobook. So, Peter Clines, welcome to this, sir. How are you doing today?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I know we've been dancing back and forth trying to make this work, so.
Yes, and you have been very kind for allowing me the leeway to, reschedule this as well. So, while we get started with this interview, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who is Peter Clines?
Peter Clines was a young boy who died back in 1970, and I adopted his identity. And I grew up back in New England. I'm in California now, a weird little town, which honestly, it's only been over the past couple of years. I have come to realize how odd and weird the little town I grew up in was. But I grew up there, went to college out there, and after college just decided I need to get out of here. I need to do something else. And I was working at a shopping mall selling men's clothes, and a friend of mine who also worked in the mall, we were like a college friend, we were having lunch, and she said, well, I'm moving to California next week. You want to come? And I said, yes. And that's how I ended up out here, which got me into the film industry, which got me into film journalism eventually. I would interview screenwriters, do reviews, stuff like that. And then that eventually, led to me doing fiction. But really, I had been doing fiction all along. I've mentioned before, when I was 11, I sent out my first submission to Marvel Comics to Jim Shooter, which dates me, who was editor-in-chief at the time, even though he's not the person you should send submissions to. The editor-in-chief is not the person. And it was absolutely horrible. I mean, it was something written by an 11-year-old who really liked the X-Men and New Mutants. And but I actually got a personalized, very professional rejection letter from him. I know people always love to talk about how horrible Jim Shooter was, but I was a little kid who sent in this horrible submission, and he wrote back like, all right, we're not going to accept this. I think you need to work on this a little. You should develop this. You should work on that. And I was like, okay. And I really lucked out. I was submitting to Marvel for a while as a kid, back when you could just, send stuff in and people would write back to you. And basically everybody I heard from at Marvel again and again and again just kept encouraging me, keep trying. You get a chance at this. And then I tried doing short stories. I did my horrible high school novel, my horrible college novel, my horrible after college / moving to California novel. And then like 2 novels after that, I wrote Ex-Heroes.
Awesome.
With also a big break in there to try and write screenplays, because I moved to California and joined Hollywood, and that's what you do.
So that's true. That's one of the prerequisites of going to California, that you're a potential scriptwriter. I do have to ask you, coming from Maine, it's Stephen King's background, there must be something in the water for all these budding authors. It seems to, you have got the bug as well. I know you're not related to Ernest Cline's, but since Ready Player One has gotten so famous, how many times have you gotten bothered by people who confuse you for being his relative, his brother, his alternate identity?
I couldn't tell you. I honestly couldn't. And here's a funny story. I actually remember I mentioned that I used to do interviews for screenwriting stuff. I interviewed Ernie.
Oh,
like 2 years before Ready Player One came out, the movie. If you remember, or not Ready Player One, Fanboys. Sorry. that fanboys, basically like it was going to come out and then they pushed it back into reshoots and it was going to come out and they pushed it back into reshoots again. And so I interviewed Ernie somewhere in there and he and I talked for like an hour. We had a laugh about the fact that we almost have the same last name. And then they pushed it back again. So the interview never got published, nothing. Years later, I was at, this would have been like 2016, 2017. I was at the San Diego Comic-Con Random House Party and finally got to meet Ernie face to face, and we were talking, and I said, "So here's the weird thing. I think we've technically met before." And he's like, "What?" And I'm like, "Do you remember, like at this point, 10 years ago, you did an interview about fanboys for creative screenwriting?" And he's like, "Yeah, it never came out." "Was that you?"
Well, that is a pretty funny, but I do remember this tweet of yours that, you know, when either his movie was releasing or the second Ready Player 2 was coming out, you had tweeted out that, you know, for all those, like something to the effect of like, you know, I am not related to him. I am not.
Yes.
Please do not, you know, tweet at me. He might be somebody else on Twitter. So I just thought I had to ask you that because I was
it happens all the time. It's actually very fun. He has actually been congratulated on his X-Heroes books that they're so fun and they're so great. I've been congratulated on Ready Player One, and I think we've both gotten the flip side of it too. That there are reviews on Amazon for some of my books. They're like, "I can't believe this is the same guy who wrote Ready Player One. This is horrible."
Oh, I mean, Amazon reviews, I mean, they're helpful, but sometimes you just feel like people, when they're submitting them, like the book's title, the book's cover, everything is then right in front and center. Like,
yeah, exactly.
How do you miss it? And there's supposedly people like who, you know, the review goes through a process, like, you know, it doesn't get just posted immediately, it gets checked, it gets something, somebody takes a look at it. How?
Supposedly.
Yeah, I know, because my reviews, like I try to post my reviews when I review books on Fantasy Book Critic. I try to post them on Amazon, like the release the night of. They get posted anywhere from 48 to 72 hours later, because it's always like somebody's reviewing my reviews and then it gets posted. Or if it includes one swear word, it gets deleted. Then I have to repost it with those stars and everything. So I'm always like worried, like, why is it that people who write such big reviews, they take a long time, but when idiots post these reviews like this, they just get posted. It's like Amazon is trolling authors, you know. I don't know why.
I don't think you're the first person to feel that way.
I mean, you authors would know this more so than me. You kind of told me my next question about, like, you know, when and how you decided to become an author, but I do have to ask you about the books that you write, sir. They are such a unique mix of genres, you know, like your first series, you know, it had superheroes, it had a bit of magic, but then there's also zombies. And there is, you know, of course, as the books progress along, there's a hint of more and more science fiction in the world as well. The Threshold series, and I know you didn't plan them as a series. It was 14 came first, then came, and I'm forgetting the title of the next book, but I know which one it is. The Fold, yes, thank you, sir. And then, of course, came Dead Moon and so on and so forth. And then you also written the Robinson Crusoe Lycanthrope, you know, the solo book as well. You're all over the map when it comes to genre. Like, nobody can fix you on one specific point. So my question is a little bit twofold. How do you classify your books? And secondly, how anxious are your editors and your agent, because when they have to pitch it, try to sell your books, how much of a hard time do they have? Or do they just give up and say, this is Peter's book, make of that what you will?
Okay, I'll kind of answer this in reverse order. My agent is wonderful, and he totally gets the type of stuff I do. I can call him up and say, hey, I want to do a book about this. I want to do a book about this. And he'll generally give me like a little, like, okay, that might be a hard sell right now because of XYZ, whatever. But most of the time he's just like, okay, you know, about a year ago, I went to him and said, I want to do a 6-book classic monster series. And he was like, okay, tell me about it. And I spelled out for him how I wanted to do it and everything. And he pitched it to a couple people, and we had trouble. Basically, everyone liked it, so he wasn't worried about that. And that was the same thing. It's like, it's kind of magic, but there's some science in here. The thing I'm doing right now is like sci-fi and straight fantasy. I think, and I might be very naive here, I think readers have become much more open to the idea of mixed genres. that, you know, we've all grown up in a time with Star Wars, you know, which is very clearly science fantasy. We've grown up with Doctor Who, the old series and the new series, which the new series tries to lean a little harder into science. But I mean, the old series had full-on vampires, it had wizards, it had all this sort of, you know, all this stuff. It would go back and forth between being like funny sci-fi, and there's a couple, Tom Baker had like a couple flat out horror episodes, you know. We have comic books that do it. I mean, we have a world where Doctor Strange and Iron Man are contemporaries, and everyone just accepts it. This makes sense. So I think it's become easier to dabble. You're always going to have purists who I just want sci-fi. I just want this. I just want this. I was talking with Chris Rao, formerly of IDW, back when he was still with IDW, and he talked about how there was a point where they realized, like, wow, people who read G.I. Joe really do not want giant shape-changing robots in with their G.I. Joe. You're always going to have those people. I don't want the stuff to cross. And then you're going to have the people like me who are like, oh my God, yes, have them cross. I want to see them cross all the time. And also throw in ROM and Mask and the Inhumanoids, anything else you've got, put it all in there. I want to see it all. So I just think that's, yes, I know I am hard to classify. I don't apologize for it because I'm just writing the stuff I like. And, you know, it would be really cool if I could just say, yes, I am a sci-fi author, I am this. And usually when people ask me, what do you write? I just go, weird stuff, you know.
I mean, your books are truly unique, sir. Like, that is one thing I can tell unabashedly. Like, you know, there's very few authors like you. You know, there's like, and of course you follow in the giant Michael Crichton's footsteps, but he was more so science fiction with a hint, you know, of action, adventure, and thriller. But you kind of take it 10 steps forward in a good way, nothing in a bad way. And I'm pretty sure there are other authors as well, you know, who can like claim to the fact that they're very hard to classify. And in this day and age, you know, with audiobooks, with ebooks, that's actually a plus point, because you'll always be able to find your crowd who'll generally seek out, you know, your books, like you said. I do. Well, thank you for answering that. Thank you for, clarifying what your agent feels as well. I want to talk a little bit about your writing process, because, you know, you have written such varied books, like, where do you start from? Do you start with a character? Do you start with an image in your mind, like George R. R. Martin had with The Song of Ice and Fire, or an idea, like I believe you had written about the Broken Room's inception? Can you talk about a little bit about like how each and every novel grows for you? Is it similar or is it different, that entire process?
It's always different. I think most authors would say that. Again, that might just be, you know, me projecting my own biases, but it's such a random thing of what inspires you at any given point. Sometimes it might be, you know, coming up with a really cool character. Sometimes it might be a neat idea. One of my books you mentioned earlier, Dead Moon, actually came about from my partner and I were driving home up the 405 freeway here in Los Angeles. Well, not here in Los Angeles, but in Los Angeles. And basically there's a stretch where you pass a military graveyard, and we just happened to pass it as the moon came out, a full moon. And we were joking about it, and I think she originally came up with the basic idea, as she's also a writer, so we were firing stuff back and forth, and she came up with the idea of people moving graveyards up to the moon for space reasons. And then we sort of went back and forth about like, well, how would that work? Because different cultures have really firm rules about like how you do burials, how you do this, when you do burials. Like, you can't spend 1 month waiting to ship, you know, great grandma to the moon. So, and as we're going back and forth, because I'm me, I then said, oh, and then there's that one day when that weird meteor hits out in the, you know, the far edge of the graveyard, and suddenly all the dead people get up, and that's where Dead Moon came from. The Broken Room basically came from anyone, if you follow me on Twitter, on Saturdays, I have a bad habit of watching old B movies or newer B movies and just sort of live critiquing them. I try not to be mean about it or cool about it, but just to have fun and point out like little, okay, this does not make any sense in a storytelling way. This is pulling on my own film experience. I would not have shot this way. This is a horrible shot to do this, that sort of thing. At one point I was watching a movie, and I think it was a British movie actually, but it just started with this like woman in her 20s walking to a bar, looking around, kind of homing in on this old guy drinking in the corner. And for whatever reason, my brain just jumped and went with it. And it's like, oh, she got sent to him by someone because he's a spy. Like he's the old best of the best, but now he's drunk and she needs his help because she can't trust anyone else. And like all this stuff was just going in my head. And then it sort of popped up with also like, and it's because she can see ghosts, and the people who made her so she can see ghosts are trying to get her back. And that's why she needs him. And it's a ghost who told her to go find him here and all this. And the movie itself was not any of this. I think it actually turned out to be a zombie movie or something. But and the guy was like her father, his straightish father or something. But anyway, I watched that, and my idea kind of stuck with me for a while. And then at one point it just hit me, wait, it's not a woman coming in and telling him this about the ghosts and all this, it's a little girl. And the minute I had that, it was like stuck in my head, to the point that I had actually been working on another book, going back and forth with my agent and editor. And I actually dropped that book altogether and started working on The Broken Room. And so we went through about 6-7 months when I kept telling my agent, like, yeah, it's going fine. Yeah, it's going good. And he thought I was doing the other book. So when this showed up on his computer and he started reading, he's like, this is not what we've been talking about. I like it, but it's this is not about time travel. This is so yeah, so, ideas everywhere.
Okay.
So,
well, thank you for sharing that. And actually that kind of answered my next question, because I was going to ask you, like, how the genesis of Broken Room occurred. But I do have a partial aspect of it. Like, how long did you work on it? Because I know we knew with your, I do follow you on Twitter, and I know you mentioned that you have these weird code names for your books when you're working on them. Previously, I remember when you're working on the book where there was the lady who came from the past but driving the fancy car, you had a different title for it, but that you had worked on a long time.
Paradox Bound. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I'm so sorry. I'm bad with titles, remembering them, but I do remember reading that. But how long were you working on The Broken Room before? Because I know it was during the pandemic and all.
Yes. The pandemic made The Broken Room very weird, because I think when I started it, when I really started it, I think we were just hearing about COVID. It was like this thing's going on in China. And even then, as I started writing, it was like, okay, but we'll get this under control any minute now. We're all going to band together as good human beings and take care of this. And then on top of that, I mean, what were we, 5 months into the pandemic, and the Black Lives Matter movement starts, and we had things going on like 5 miles from my house. There were things, and it was a tough time to write a book. So I know this took a lot longer than one of mine normally would. And I've sidetracked myself completely on like your entire question. I'm sorry. Yeah, this was a slightly longer one for me. I also struggled. You mentioned changing titles. I think I went through like 5 different titles for this at different points. Yeah, I think it's still, if anyone ever steals my computer, like they won't be able to find anything. It's every project I have is still in a folder under its original title. So like the book Paradox Bound is under Highways.
Yes, I remember that.
Yes.
You had mentioned that under Highways.
Yes, and I think this was when I started putting it all into a file, I think this was actually called interstice, which is a term that comes up in the book, which is basically it is the space that is created, the space that is the gap. The actual space of the gap is the interstice, the space between things.
Space between things, yes.
And then for a while, I think the first couple drafts, then it was cleft. But I was a little worried for some reason that felt a little too sexual to me, and a story about a little girl, I didn't want to do that. So, yeah.
Oh, well, no, I mean, Cleft also has a little bit of a horror edge to it. So I was, I was
It
thinking
does.
like,
It was a tough call. It was right up to the end. I think the Broken Room won out literally in the very last minutes. So
it fits. It gives enough of a intrigue that you don't know what's going to happen, and then you're like, okay, you just go into it blind, because the blurb also is very exciting, and then you just go into blind thinking that it's going to be one thing, and then of course within literally the first couple of chapters you kind of realize, oh wait, there's ghosts, there's something else going on, and then it just goes up from there. I do want to ask you about this, because I realized when I first came across the title on NetGalley, because I was very happy that you had released a new book, that it was via Blackstone Publishing. Now, I did a little bit of research on them, that I found that they're like a unique, smaller, indie press, but they're from Oregon, where I'm at. But they're of course in the southern part of Oregon, and they have always specialized in audiobooks. So I know you have a particular history with audiobooks, because your books have also done well with audio, and of course you have featured the amazing Ray Porter. But I wanted to ask you, how did you come across them? How did this association come up with them? Did they approach you? Did your your agent approach them? How did this whole thing come up?
I believe my agent went to them about it. I freely admit I love my agent, because he is totally willing to do all the business side of stuff and just not bother me with any of it. So not like bother, don't talk to me about any of that. But he knows what point to get me involved and stuff, to start talking to me. And so really this, like a lot of my books, I finished it, I handed it off to him, I went on to something else, and he basically just went out and started showing it to people. We ended up in this very weird place, because I was coming off doing 2 books that had started out as Audible exclusives. And so Audible told us, well, we're interested, of course, we won't be able to give you exclusive money for it, but we'd still like to make an offer to get the audio rights. And what ended up happening was we ended up in this weird position of Audible was offering really good money for the audio rights, but Blackstone was also very interested in it. And we went back and forth over it. And I think I am unique so far, but I don't know. I think I'm actually the first author. I think someone can leap into the YouTube comments or whatever and correct me, but I think I am the first person that Blackstone has not published the audiobook for. That I am, they did all the print stuff, the ebook stuff, and they did a phenomenal job with it. I love this cover so much on this book. But the audiobook was done through Audible for them. So I think I am their first straight, so to speak, just print publication. So,
well, that kind of flows with your uniqueness of your career so far as well, doing something different with the audiobook, as well. But I haven't heard the audio, but I want to get it, because I read it as an ebook, and then of course I saw it was audio. I'm like, okay, I'm going to get it, but it's definitely up on my in my wish list as well. But I do want to talk to you about The Broken Room now, because of course it's your most recent book, and it is so fantastic. I love the touches of horror within, the book. The book starts out as a military, I don't want to say military thriller, but it's like an action thriller, so to speak. Very much set, for anybody who has read any action thrillers in the, from the 90s, early 2000s, even 2010s, they'll kind of feel at home in the start. I don't know what they'll feel like towards the end, but there's also these touches of horror within the story, because whenever you get Natalie's portions of her, of her perspective, you definitely understand that there's a science fiction sci-fi element, and then there's those weird touches of horror. Was this on purpose? Because I know when you mentioned how the genesis came up for us, you first had the idea only for Coast, but how did you kind of, how did this, the idea, the germ of the idea that started with Coast, how did it, end up with horror? And last bit again, sorry, does this exist within the Threshold universe, or is it a parallel universe?
Okay, let's do that one first and just get it out of the way. Mm-hmm. You could probably call this Threshold adjacent if you wanted to. There are definite elements in this which are reminiscent of elements of that. Things crossed my mind. There was an earlier draft of this that was very, very much a Threshold book. But it also felt a little limiting that way, that the book wouldn't be quite as accessible for some people, that it's harder to do a book that is like book 6 set in this universe, book 6. Okay, here's a better way to look at it. Mm-hmm. It's really easy to show somebody Captain America, the First Avenger, and they can just get it. It's a lot harder to show them Captain America Civil War as their first movie and have them, oh, well, that's this person and that's there, and he's here because of this. And they're like, at that point, there's enough mythology built up, you know, like coming into any universe, any series much further along. So I trimmed a lot of stuff down. If someone chooses to see that stuff there, I wouldn't argue with them. There are a couple definite connections. There's one very solid connection there that you can see. And if you like it and go with it, I am totally okay with that, with you in general, not you, but but you, the reader, interpreting it that way. So that's it, working backwards. The horror elements and everything, it just sort of started springing out of it. I mean, I think part of it is, obviously, it's really hard to do any sort of story where we're experimenting on little kids and not have a horror element. I mean, we don't see a lot of stories about the haha, we're experimenting on kids and it's all fun and games and everyone loves it and we're all happy, the end. So those horror aspects of it, you know, came. And then as I was going, it just started getting, just sort of naturally, like a lot of my books do, just sort of veering crazier and crazier. As things would come to me, because I did have the book outlined, and then about 2/3 of the way through, the outline just starts, yeah, we don't need that anymore. We're veering off and going in this way. And things just became darker, weirder, creepier. So.
Wow. Okay. That's very good to know. And now that the darker and creepier parts, you know, are completely understandable because, you know, and I don't want to give too much spoilers because of the nature of the broken room, as the title suggests. But you mentioned that this was, you know, it's hard to write about, you know, these little children, because that's what happens. It's a little bit of a spoiler, but that's what happens, and it's hard to write. But how did you? And I know you being such a empathetic person, you know, how did you write that stuff? Because it's sometimes you get into Natalie's POV so well. I mean, and I don't mean to say this like, you know, as a negative point, but as a writer, it was the creepiness of it, the horror of what she had to endure comes across to the reader. And it makes you cringe. It really does. Like when I was reading those sections, I felt horrified. But when you were writing them, because it's all in your head, how do you write that stuff? How do you make sure that you stay sane and you are not depressed by what you're imagining, of course, in this imaginary world?
It's tough. I'm not gonna lie. There were points of this that I went back and forth with things because like I didn't, at first I was doing this and I didn't want it to be too harsh, and I didn't want it to be I also didn't want it to be too cliche. I know, here's a great example of it. Obviously, many people have said it, you can easily see some parallels with Stranger Things. It's a little girl who got experimented on, and now she has weird powers or weird abilities, however you want to look at it. In the earlier versions of this, the kids were getting their heads shaved, and my agent saw that and he was actually worried about that. He's like, this does just really feel a little too Stranger Things. Mm-hmm. The catch is though, I rewrote it and I went through and it sort of became a softer, gentler book in that. But it also then started feeling very false to me. Mm-hmm. That the really unfortunate truth is we all just have enough of a basic understanding of the way the world works, the way science works, the way things work in a lab. I mean, this sounds like a horrible way to put it. No matter how you feel about it morally, ethically, whatever, we all have a pretty good sense of what goes on with lab animals and what happens to lab animals. I actually, while I was writing this, there were a couple people I was constantly getting in touch with. One of them was, there's an urban fantasy author named Christy Cherish. And Christy Cherish actually used to be a genetic engineer before she started writing urban fantasy. And she and I had many long Zoom calls where we talked about lab procedures and what is it like with lab animals. And, you know, one of her things that really stuck with me was like, no matter what you like to think, you end up having favorites. Yes, we have 50 rats in the cage, and
Mhm.
oh look, number 43, isn't he great? Oh, he's so friendly, he's so good. And at the end of the day, you're going to gas him and dissect him and all that.
Mhm.
um and that was one thing that helped me out a bit, was the realization that for some of the scientists involved with this is a horrible thing, that they're doing it and they enable it. And that was sort of, I guess that really became the touchstone for me, was the idea that, ultimately, yes, you're still doing this, you're still an awful person, but that people can have regrets about this. And in a weird way, I think that actually makes it worse,
Mhm.
like more horrible. um so I don't know. And then, like we were talking about earlier, there was so much else going on in the world
Yes.
that I guess I also sort of had this, weird as it is, this buffer of, no matter what I was doing here, there was so much else actually going on in the world at the time, that it kind of made some of the things in the book seem not as bad. And I know that's a horrible thing to say,
No, but I get
but
you. I get you on that. What you're
you
saying,
know,
it makes sense.
so basically, when I had to resort to like drinking heavily at the end of the day, there were multiple things I was drinking for, just not the book. So
Well, it speaks to your talent, sir, that how well you've written Natalie's POV in the book, like that the horror of what is happening, and especially with when you hear Hector's POV of it, like when you see his thoughts of what he feels about it, the horror becomes double. It becomes doubly fight. If you see from a sane person's perspective, like oh dear gods, what is happening? What has happened to this poor little girl? And of course, as a reader, because and there's a lot of, and I want to talk to you this a little bit more later, because I have a question for this as well about the things which you have considered are of course run parallel to what we have seen so far in real life as well. But again, coming back to the Broken Room, I believe you wrote this as a standalone story. Would I be right in saying that, sir?
yeah.
Okay. But the way you have written the book, the way the story expands and ends, there seems to be a scope for a sequel. Would you in the future be writing, willing to write a sequel with Hector and Natalie, because they were such tremendous characters, there's
Oh,
pain
absolutely.
and everything.
No, yeah, I would love to go back to them. I have to admit, I wrote it as a standalone. The idea was not that this will kick off the lone fox and cub, story of Hector and Natalie. But there's okay, and this is how the author brain works. I have a book I talk about sometimes on my Ranger Writing blog, The Suffering Map. That was my after college move to California novel. It's awful. It did get me. It was the first thing I finished. It was the first thing that got me in front of a couple agents and publishers and everything. But it's awful, and everyone who ever rejected it was 100% correct to do it. That said, I also came up with spin-off ideas for it. Of and I could do this with this character, this with that character. And it struck me a while back that one of these spin-off ideas I had for that, Hector and Natalie would fit in perfectly. Like if I chopped off the connection to that other book and just made it this story and made the two main characters, Hector and Natalie, like this would work. So this would be really, really fun to do this, but we're going to wait on that for now. I can think a couple other things, but no, I don't think there's ever been a book where I'm just like, and I never want to touch on this again or talk about any of this, at the same time, I never want to write a sequel just to write a sequel. Obviously we all have bills to pay and all that, but I hopefully will never be at a point where I just have to grind something out just to grind it out, just because, whatever, I need to pay the bills, because I've done that already. I did that when I was a journalist, when I was desperately writing, I've got to write 3 movie reviews tonight so I can have food next week. Oh boy.
It's understandable, but I honestly, as a fan and as a person who has read The Broken Room, I do wish, and like you mentioned, you had that idea. I do hope that someday in the future, not right now, because already you seem to have too many ideas. It's always just which idea is the best one right now. But I do hope that we get to see Hector and Natalie, just to see what happens next, because the way the story ends and with what the past events have happened with Natalie, it seems too good to just end it over there and not have anything else happen. But it's also, Hector has a huge mystery in his background. And again, I don't want to talk about it, but it has something to do with his sister and, his family, which, you would know about, but that just feels like ripe, fertile ground for it not to be explored. So again, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that one day maybe you would get to do that. Which kind of leads to maybe my next question, sir. And this is kind of a little bit of a mental explosion on my side, because I had read a lot of, before I started first reading fantasy, I was actually a mystery thriller reader. I used to read a lot. I read Tom Clancy. I got introduced to Bradford, but then I also went on to James Collins. I read a lot of those action military thrillers. Matthew Riley is still one of my favorite authors. What I noticed was that in those books, invariably, the good guy would be this, obviously, white Caucasian dude, usually of the US military, or somebody who was ex-military, but of the special forces, with a special forces background. And of course, he would be righteous with his fury. He would be coming guns blazing, or quietly as an assassin, but of course, knowing all the special skills and do what's right at the end of the day. Now, your book, The Broken Room, also deals with a person who has a similar suspicious military background. Hector Ramirez is brutal at what he does, but he also has a conscience. And perhaps Hector Ramirez is not his true name as well, because that's hinted at. He picked that name because Natalie approached him with that. Was this a conscious decision on your part to portray the main character of, or at least one of the main characters, or actually in this case, both the main characters, Natalie and him, as brown-skinned individuals caught in this world, which of course there's shades of racism, and he talks about it. He explains it as well. Natalie, we see it through her eyes, but she doesn't understand that it was racism at that time. Was this a conscious decision on your part to write this, book with that focus as well? Because it's not just a thing that's there; it's properly explored too.
It's okay. So now let's walk out into the minefield, shall we?
Yes, please.
First off, let's just the very white elephant in the room. If for some reason you're just listening to this, I am a very, very, very white man, and I think there is a very solid argument that I should not be writing stories of people of color. And I think to an extent that's true. One of the things that happened while I was writing this, okay. And now, having said all that, let me work back a little bit. When I first started coming up with this idea that it was a little girl, that people had done experiments on her, I wanted this to be, I knew part of the horror of this would be grounding in reality. And so one of the first problems I had would be, okay, if we're actually talking about lab experiments, you need lots of kids, or lots of subjects, not lots of kids, but lots of subjects. So the question is then, how do you get lots of kids that nobody would know about? Like you can't sort of just drive down to the supermarket and grab the first dozen kids you see. What happened, of course, was at this point, we all became very aware of how things were going at the United States-Mexico border for a lot of people. And the reasons for why it was happening is another huge argument I'm sure many people would love to have. And I'm sure just because I've mentioned it, they will be down there in the comments. But it happened. One or another, it happened. And I think we can all agree it's a horrible thing it happened. Mm-hmm. I have a friend who, Brooke Binkowski, she's a reporter, and she used to do the border beat. So I got in touch with her and we talked again on Zoom, because everyone was doing everything on Zoom for the past 2 years. But we talked a lot about, okay, we hear about these kids who are getting lost in the system, vanishing in the system, all that. What does that actually mean? When we're seeing this kid is lost in the system, is it like when I lose something in my office? I know it's still here. Mm-hmm. I just need to remember where I put it. I need to remember, or, has it actually been deliberately hidden, or mm-hmm. has it just been through complete neglect lost, that it is, gone like that? And the horrible truth was that we came up, that talking with her, that I came to learn was, yeah, a lot of these kids are just gone. For all intents and purposes, they've been erased. Mm-hmm. And in just that sort of awful way, like as I'm hearing this and processing how horrible it is, in the back of my mind, I'm also going, perfect, this will work great. So I'm a monster. Mm-hmm. Once I had that, that then led me to Hector. So now I know Natalie is going to be, as you said, a brown skinned person. She's going to be from El Salvador. This fits for a number of reasons. The next thing was I wanted to give her ties to Hector that weren't direct ties. And let's face it, like you said, so often in these stories, it is the big bulging white guy who is saving the little blonde girl or whatever. So the default thing would just be, okay, I will make Hector Latino as well. But I just didn't want to do that. And then that also puts me in the place of, as said, am I the guy who should be writing about the Latino experience in America, especially at this particular point in history? Two things that I went with. One, because I am the sort of guy who brings things up again and again. Hector's backstory fit into some other things I had done. And if people dig around a bit, mild spoiler, Hector's in the Ex-Heroes books. If you know where to look for him, and actually double, triple fun Easter egg, between these two books, you can figure out some of Hector's family history if you dig down and sit it out. The way I ended up looking at it was, and I think this is the best analogy to make, let's think about Star Trek. If I want to do a story about Geordi LaForge going on the holodeck and having a holodeck girlfriend, or getting trapped on a planet, you know, with a faulty transporter, and he's got to like rebuild the communicator badge into a new transporter relay, something like that, I think that's fine. I think it's actually good to write a story and look, it doesn't have to be a white guy doing this stuff, you know? And in that sense, I think anyone is open to writing anything. If it was going to be a story about Geordi LaForge going down to this planet where they still have chattel slavery, and Geordi gets kidnapped and locked in chains and forced to work a field, we are now dealing with a lot of other issues. And I think I'm not really the right guy to write that story. I'm not saying I couldn't, you know, I could come up with something, but I think a lot of what I'm writing would be like secondhand, third hand, empathetic at best, and not really getting at a lot of the core stuff of what it means to be this person going through this thing. So yes, like you said, I do touch on racism in the story. I do address some of what it's like, but at the same time, I didn't want this to be about a Latino guy on the run in America. I wanted to be about a secret agent on the run in America who happens to be Latino. Because why not? Like, and the truth is, I actually know a guy back from when I worked in the film industry who had been in the Marines and had been overseas. And the fact was, this was a little bit of Hector's background. Being someone of brown skin actually works for you in a lot of the world. And the military knows this. You know, they don't just, you know, pick all white guys for these missions, all that, because guess what? White guys stand out all over the place. And so I'm not going to bring his name up just in case, because I don't think there's a reason not to. But yeah, he told me stories of things he had done over there. And it, like, yeah, it totally makes sense that Hector could be this person with these skills. So why not? You know?
And well, thank you for writing it that way, because, you know, I listen to you and I get that, you know, like when you're saying, like, you know, that it's you when you're writing certain stories, there is that added account of, like, you know, you being a different race. But I feel like, you know, as a writer, sir, just because, and of course, everybody has different levels of empathy, but everybody also has different levels of writing skills. You were able to encapsulate that experience of both what Hector and Natalie felt in a way that didn't feel gaudy, or it didn't feel like, you know, that you're just like putting it there for the sake of the story, but it felt true to the story and it felt true to them as well. So that's just my opinion. It felt nice. Coming to a second point of this story, because the way you've written the story and the way, you know, the type of story that it is for, a lot of these, you know, hyper action oriented, you know, muscular thrillers, the readers of these fiction, they kind of lean a little bit more rightward, you know, in their personal politics. That's, again, that's a generalization. I accept that. I'm a left, I'm slightly more leftwards, but I read those thrillers. It's fun sometimes. It depends on the writer. Your book, you also mentioned this, like, it touches on a lot of racism angles, but it also touches on the, the whole travesty at the border between the United States and Mexico. It touches upon these sensitive subjects of like these kids getting lost, people, who send their kids. And Natalie's story is kind of like a brutal odyssey until she reaches the border, and then it kind of gets even more darker, so as to speak. You potentially risk alienating a lot of this audience who were, who would have accepted this book if it was just like a hyper muscular action thriller, even if it's not a brown guy. But it didn't, if it glossed over these parts. You did not. You had Natalie's POV. You did not shirk away from it. It made the reader, encapsulate it as well and see what it truly was. That was a brave decision. Looking back now, since the book has been released, it has gotten over 500 plus reviews on Amazon. I should have checked this on Goodreads, but I'm pretty sure it has nearly double the amount of that, or at least 1.5 times on Goodreads as well. What has the reader feedback been? And now looking back, what do you think of your decision to introduce these angles of, the whole travesty of the border, the injustices, and all of that?
Overall feedback has been very good. Weirdly enough, just as you sort of predicted, I have been accused that I have gone woke, which is doubly funny because honestly, I don't sort of like make a secret of my politics. I'm also on the left. I try not to be the person in the book banging my leftist drum or whatever in most of my books, and I try to have fair viewpoints of different people. But this particular situation, I think, again, like we mentioned with the general border situation, argue about all you want about whose fault it is. The fact is it's happening and it's awful. And if you're the type of person who can look at that and say, it's awful, but so what? Like if you don't think it's awful, I think there's something really wrong with you, that I don't care whose fault it is. I don't care who did it. It's an awful situation. We did actually cut it down in the first version of this that my agent saw. Natalie's story, when she starts talking, was probably another 100 pages. Okay. Yeah, very seriously. But okay, in all fairness, that's 100 manuscript pages of mine. So it was probably like would have been like another 45, 50 print pages. I had a lot of stuff in there. And part of it was, he actually did point out to me, one, yes, it's a long haul and it's awful. And he pointed out, because again, he understands me. He's like, I know that you want to get this across. I know you want to show this. Do we need to show all of it? Do we need to show every single horrible thing and expound on it? Which also made me realize, which you've kind of hinted at, how much of it is more powerful because she doesn't understand what's going on. That there's a lot of stuff that we can just sort of imply. She can say her understanding of it, and we as the reader, or we as the reader getting it through Hector, realize what actually happened here in this scenario, in this moment. And so that's a place where I could cut stuff and actually make it, I think, more powerful, because now instead of me telling you this, you're realizing it. So I have a whole crazy theory on subtext and how subtext affects the brain. But so there was that. It also like helped me break that up a bit. But I think, yeah, I knew there was a chance this was going to alienate people, but at the same time, I think a story sort of has to be true, that if you don't do it, well, like I was talking about with shaving Natalie's head. Yes, people can look at it and say, oh, you're just trying to copy 11 from Stranger Things. I'm like, well, in the sense that, yes, they were also shaving 11's head because they were doing experiments and putting electrodes on her. It's what you do. But doing it softer, easier, whatever, felt like a cop-out. So, I mean, I think it's kind of interesting that at no point in this do I mention politics, do I mention anything, but there are like a couple ranty reviews on Amazon, which basically talk about how I'm blaming this all on Trump. And I don't think at any point I even mentioned,
no,
I do not think the word president or the name Trump appear anywhere in this book. And that was a deliberate choice, because I knew it would be very easy to just go, and Trump made it so much worse. Trump made it horrible. But I also knew that would be an immediate, like, my agent would talk about, my editor would comment, and I'm like, yeah, you have to remove this. You have to get rid of it. I know I had a line like that in Terminus that was much more generic. And my editor on that book was like, I think we should pull this joke. And for that particular one, I was like, we don't have to. It's going to be, you know, there's a line in Terminus where two guys are talking and one of them says, do you know what the problem is with you Americans? And his response is, our president. and he was like, I don't think we want this. I don't think we want a joke, you know, that this is going to just run out. And I was like, okay, seriously though, A, it's clearly a joke. B, because his whole thing was like, well, you know, there's going to be an election in like 2 years and we want the book to have longer legs than that. I'm like, do you really think in 2 years, no matter what happens in the election, the entire country is going to be unified then and no one's going to make fun of the president anymore? So yeah, in that sense, no. But for this, I just, it's a touchy subject. But I just think it's what the story needed. So
it did, and kudos to your point, because I do want to reiterate this. Like, nowhere in the book have you made it political. It is not a political story. It is
no, I
a story
really want.
It's just a story of Hector and Natalie coming together because of a specific reason. Again, not coincidence, for a specific reason. And you're absolutely right. There's no mention of the word Trump or the president or the politics of it all. It truly is just Hector doing the right thing because he feels this is the right thing to do. And Natalie, of course, being a young child, just caught up and then being told what, you know, where she has to go to kind of get help. That's all about it. So kudos to you on that. And also it takes a special amount of strength to kind of go against the grain, especially when the crowd, the inbuilt audience for this genre is expecting certain things. And I'm sorry you had those ranty reviews. It's annoying.
It happens.
It is, but it is very annoying. I do want to make a shift away because I don't want to, you know, get you all in too much with these dark questions. I apologize for that, but I did want to highlight them because this book was special in that regards. Like, you know, it wasn't a typical book, but it had its special things. But I do want to ask you about this because I realized that there was a very special assassin, a certain bespectacled assassin who makes an appearance in the Broken Room, and Hector Ramirez, crucially so, is very scared of him. Now, for those who do not know, to the readers who haven't read previous Peter's books, he has a character called Quilt, who makes an appearance in the Broken Room and also has previously made an appearance in the Junkie Quatrain, short story collection, as well as in Expurgatory, mild spoiler. I want to ask you, is this the same Quilt, sir? Is this someone different? Is this a parallel version of Quilt?
I'd probably say it's a parallel version in a way. Do you remember many years back, I think at this point, well, many years back, I think, there was a show called Sliders. And
I do remember that show, yes.
It was Jerry O'Connell and John Rhys Davies and crap, I cannot remember. I can picture the lead and the other. Anyway, there was this group of people who were jumping realities that they had Jerry O'Connell was a grad student who had made like a dimension jumping portal. The problem being you can't tell what dimension you're jumping to. And so it's always about them jumping into these different alternate realities. One of the running jokes in it for like the first 2 seasons is wherever they went, if they got in a cab, it was always the same cab driver. And the producers even talked about that they really like this sort of quiet idea that there's this guy and no matter where you go, he's a cab driver. This is what this guy was meant to do. And he does it. I feel that way about Quilt, that I think no matter what reality you're in, no matter what version of the world you're in, Quilt is one of the most dangerous human beings who ever lived. There is no happier, gentler version of Quilt. There is no version of Quilt where he became a school janitor or something like that. That he is always this just horrible, ruthless, merciless, gun for hire. And he's actually, believe it or not, we talked about this, Quilt shows up in The Suffering Map, the After California novel that I wrote. He also shows up in my college novel, which was called The Trinity. He's in that. And so I put him in that, like that was where I created him, was in The Trinity. I put him in The Suffering Map as kind of like a joke to myself with a reference to that. And so then when I was writing the Junkie Quatrain originally,
Mhm.
and I was coming up with the for those who haven't read it and don't know it, the Junkie Quatrain is 4 post-apocalyptic zombie stories that all take place over the same 3 days, involving 4 different groups of people or individuals, and one of them is Quilt. And the story I've kind of told is it's basically zombie Rashomon, that depending on which story you read and which order you read them in, you will end up with very different views of all the different characters. So, and different perspectives on what is happening in any given scene. So Quilt showed up in that. And then later on, I think at some point, I can't remember exactly where it was. It might have honestly just been during, I think I was writing Excommunication, the 3rd X Heroes book. And now, other mild spoiler, one of the things in at least one universe that Quilt is more famous for is his daughter, who is named Karen, and for big fans, Karen Quilt is Stealth in the X Heroes books. I believe as it came, I just thought it would be very funny in the 3rd book is where her last name gets mentioned for the first time, to say that and sort of just have it as my own little personal joke that, oh, she would be his daughter. And then in the 4th book, Expurgatory, where he actually shows up then, it was like, okay, how am I actually going to make this work now? That, how can I do this? And I think I pulled it off. I like to pretend I did. So yes, Quilt shows up in this. I just love, Quilt is sort of like my Cad Bane. He's the guy who's just like, look, it's just business. I was hired to do a job. I'm going to do the job. I have no personal feelings about it. You know, he's just the one guiding principle I've always had for Quilt is that Quilt is professional. That he basically, you know, we should all be professional about this. Me as the person you're hiring, you as the client, you know, and if you're going to do something dumb, you know, don't. That would be very unprofessional. There's a bit in the Junkie Quatrain where Quilt is hired, we find out in a flashback, and then the people who hired him decide like, and now we kill the assassin to clean the thing, like to wipe the trail clean. And Quilt is so annoyed by this act of frustration that when their assassin comes, he kills the assassin, breaks all his arms and legs, and leaves the body on the front door of their like office building. Like, no, you do not do this.
And he also mentions being a professional and extending professional courtesy in this book. Like there's a bit of a dialogue between him and an actor, which was funny, but of course the situation is really serious, but it was so funny about extending professional courtesy. So I thought that was hilarious. Leading on to my next question, because again, you mentioned so many things about Quilt, because like, he's like the Stan Lee in your books, and he's always making these minor appearances. I do want to ask, will you ever, you know, or do you ever plan to write a proper story about Quilt? Because, you know, even though he's such a no-nonsense character, but he has got a bit of black humor to him or his appearances. Do you think there's ever a possibility that you would write a full story featuring him, or from his, not from his POV certainly, but with him being central driving force?
I mean, I'd never say I'm not gonna do it, but I think, at least as I see it for the moment, he is much more fun as a small doses character, as the guy who shows up here and there and is just, you know, like in this, that it's like, okay, what's the worst that could, oh my God, they got Quilt. Oh crap. That was the worst thing I imagined.
Oh, it's always funny whenever I see him pop up, and you know, to your point, like when I saw him in Expert, because I didn't make the connection when Karen's last name was revealed in, you know, the 3rd book, which was Excommunication, and the Expurgatory. When he got there, I was like, I remember sending you an email because my mind was blown, and I had read Junkie Quatrain before that, so I was like, is this the same Quilt? Is this the same universe? But of course, that was really funny when that happened.
And he's also, if you look carefully, he's in Paradox Bound.
Oh, drats. Now I have to reread that. I have to reread a lot of your books, sir, because now, you know, with Hector Ramirez, I think I have a clue of what you have mentioned, but now
it's a super little thing. It's not really a spoiler, but at one point in the beginning, there's a chapter in Paradox Bound done from Deputy Zeke's point of view, when he is talking about basically going on and on about how much he does not like Eli. And at one point, he decides he's going to rearrange all the wanted posters. Like he photoshops his own wanted poster for Eli, and puts it up on with all their other wanted posters, because that's how sane and balanced he is. But in doing this, he refers to the fact that as he's moving around the FBI's 10 most wanted, and when he rearranges it all, Eli is right, if I remember correctly, like right above the guy quilt on the FBI's 10 most wanted.
Cool. He would love that, right? For him being a professional, he would definitely love that.
He would not. He would be very upset. He would probably complain. He would complain that the wanted list was very disorganized. And
well, somebody's reorganized it for some degree, but he's on it, so that's a plus. Switching gears a little bit more, sir. I do want to ask you about the X Hero series. I know, it kind of has ended in a way which was not, which wasn't not quite exactly to plan. You did have, mentioned, I believe, in your blog post or on Twitter that there's like a book called Extension, which is supposedly the end book or like the last book that you had planned.
It was the last book I had planned. My wild, big, crazy dream was 7 books.
Got it. Okay,
but I also knew that, but I also knew like any series, as I've talked about and you've probably seen, you always have a drop off. Book 2 never sells as good as book 1. Book 3 never sells as good as book 2. And it really just comes down to, the angle of that decline, that slope downward, what it is. And when it crosses, and it's the angle which tells you how many books you're going to get. And when it crosses that, okay, they're no longer profitable line. And if you're really lucky, you get to plan out the whole thing the way you wanted to. A lot of the X-Heroes books were really written, maybe I'll get another book, maybe I won't. Maybe I'll get another book, maybe I won't. The only 2 where I absolutely knew I was getting another book was 2 to 3.
Okay.
Expatriates to Excommunication. I knew while I was writing Expatriates that I was going to get to do Excommunication. That was the only time. And since then, it's like I still had this loose 7-book plan, but it was also totally done under the understanding that maybe I'll get to do another one. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not. So,
would you ever hope or plan to self-publish supposedly the last one, Extension, or the 7th sequel, like the supposed ending, loose ending that you have?
I've thought about it. The problem is I am not a good publisher. Like I'm a good writer, but writing and publishing are 2 very different, distinct things. And there are people out there who obviously do phenomenal with it. A good friend of mine, Craig DeLuey, is phenomenal at, like, he has a whole self-publishing machine going and he's amazing at it. Obviously we have like Brandon Sanderson just had his massive Kickstarter, great, good on him. I'm inept. I'm not good at it, and I admit that. I have like a couple books that the rights reverted to me that I just put back up, on Amazon as ebooks. And even just to do that, I needed a lot of help. I bought the rights back, so I didn't have to do cover art. I had Craig and another friend of ours, Eloise Knapp, who is another, good self-publisher. Yeah. Okay. The 2 of them, like, they basically each took a hand and like walked me through the whole thing of how to do it. And I couldn't have done it without them. So to say, oh, would I be interested in self-publishing? It's like, on one level, yes. On another level, it would be inept. That considering how tough it was for me to do just that. Plus side, I was at a con a couple months ago, one of my first cons back, and talked with an editor, and we kind of bounced the idea of an X-Heroes thing back and forth. And I've been playing with it since then. So next time I talk with them, we might make a decision, and who knows, there may be things to talk about in the future or not. Oh, wow. But we will see.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers
crossed. Because I for me, the first 4 books, and again, this is just my opinion, the first 4 books of the X-Hero series, like up till X Purgatory, are amazing. Like they're like as close to 10 to 10, 10 of 10 as they can be. X-Isle was a little bit of a different experience, and I think that's purely due to my anticipation levels, because each book, before that, had this amazing build. So it just kept on becoming, whoa, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? Which is why I didn't quite enjoy Exiles as I should be, but then when I reread it, I'm like, this is a fantastic book on its own. It's just that, at that moment when you get it in your hands, it's like, oh, what's going to happen? So which is why I feel like for me, at least, it wasn't, as, popular as I thought it would be. But of course, the reviews are a whole different thing. The reviews do tell a whole different story. So I'm keeping my fingers
also,
crossed.
I mean, the X-Hero series also like sort of bounces around. Like you mentioned right at the beginning, they're sci-fi, they're magical, they're all this. And yeah, it totally makes sense that some books and series don't land with some people the way other books do. And I'm totally okay with that. I get it. That, Exile is basically me trying to make Aquaman cool.
Yes.
And this was before Jason Momoa made Aquaman cool. I mean, obviously
Yes.
I know people will argue, but no, in the books, this person did this and this person did this. Yeah, they did, but let's all be honest. It was Aquaman. It was
No, that is pretty cool to know. So, all right, I'm going to keep my fingers crossed, and I'm always going to be hoping. Like, I'm one of those enthusiastic people who is always hoping that some books do get out there. All right. Well, speaking about your other popular series, besides X series, because I'm pretty sure you get emails about those other series as well. The Threshold Saga. You have 4 books out so far. They're not chronological. 3 of them are set on Earth. 1 of them is set on the moon. No spoiler. It's literally in the title. Chronologically, I believe Dead Moon is the last one, like because it's in the future. The other 3, 14, dear God, Fold, and then the most Terminus, the most recent one, they're kind of chronological in that sense. There's not as a reader, you don't really find a grand plan, but you find aspects like the green cockroaches, those weird, alien whale thingies that are flying around in space. So there's things tying them around. And I know you have talked about this, like, how they didn't quite start off a series, but now they are a series because, again, of publishers and Audible wanting to market them as such. Do you have a plan for them? Are there any more books coming? What are your thoughts about that, sir?
I know for a fact, because I've already signed things. There's one story coming.
Yes.
In an anthology, but I'm not going to say more than that because it's a little bit of a surprise. I have a loose idea for a story. But again, it's sort of like, where are we going to go with it? What are we going to do? I think that the tough thing for it is that this is just my personal opinion. If you're doing cosmic horror stories, and I think ultimately that is what the Threshold books are, that it is this idea that there are horrible things out there in the world, or in the galaxy, the universe, and one way or another, some people decided to try and fight. But we ultimately know you can't win a fight like that. The best you can hope for is a stalemate, maybe, or a draw. So the thing is, from a storytelling point of view, it then becomes very tough to do more and more and more of these, because how many times do you want to see someone fight to a draw? Like I said, I have an idea for one more. Will I ever do it? Maybe. Because I have, depending on how you want to look at it, I have 9 things sort of on my menu, like, like book level projects, which are in sort of different states of how planned out they are, but also how likely they are. There's like the stack of what I want to do and how I want to do and when I want to do it. And then there's that slightly different stack of let's rearrange them a bit, and it's probably going to happen more like this. And then past that is the reality stack. And then there's also the fact that 6 months from now, IDW might come to me and say, we want you to write ROM. And I'm saying, that's great. My schedule is totally clear. I have nothing planned.
That's fair. That's absolutely fair, sir. Well,
as I sweep everything off my desk.
I'll be curious, and I'll wait for the anthology story whenever you do announce it, because that'll be cool to know about. I want to talk about this particular aspect of the Threshold series, because when I was reading 14, I came across this word kawach. And I don't know if you know about this, but I'm an Indian originally. I mean, I'm born and brought up in India. My mother tongue is Marathi. And you have used the word kawach, which is actually a Marathi word. Now, you can argue it's also a Hindi word, but basically it's a proper Marathi word. And it means shield or covering. And you used it in that right context in the book. So that blew my mind always. I wanted to ask you about this. Like, how did you come across that word, and how, why did you decide to include it? Like, is there any story behind that?
Okay, mild spoilers for 14.
Mm-hmm.
This actually just sort of came naturally that Nikola Tesla,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why, so don't ask,
Mm-hmm.
but Nikola Tesla loved giving his projects Sanskrit names.
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways, Sanskrit and Marathi share
Mm-hmm.
the same
Yep.
alphabet, and actually,
Yep.
I believe numerous words.
Yeah.
They're not identical, but
no, it's a root language for almost all of the North and West and East Indian languages, except for the Southern, which is a totally different term. But yeah, Sanskrit is Sanskrit and Pali is like the original. Sorry, I'll shut
up. So what happened was, I was working on this, and I basically hit that, and I realized this would be a clever thing to use in the book.
Mm-hmm.
That if I'm saying the machine in the book is a Nikola Tesla invention,
mm-hmm.
then he would have probably given it a Sanskrit name.
Mm-hmm.
I have a Marathi friend from college, and I got back in touch with her, and she then went to her dad and like explained, okay, we need to know this, and they went back and forth and helped me out with it, and that is how I got the word. She has actually been like a go-to for me when I need to get help
mm-hmm.
on these things. And actually just recently, I think you might have known this, about a month ago, was not quite a month, but 2 weeks ago, was the 10-year anniversary of 14 coming out.
Oh,
which was amazing.
I think I missed
for
that.
me.
Yes.
Yeah. It was mind-blowing for me. But so she actually helped me out and found we got the letters and everything. And so I got Kavak as a tattoo. Done
Nice.
With the correct letters, with the correct everything.
Script.
So yes.
That is awesome.
So that was my 10-year thing for myself. That
that is so cool to hear.
So and basically part of it for me doing that, going all the way back to the beginning, I love being able to drop in stuff like that that some people will get. And I'd actually be fascinated if because obviously the word comes up in the book before we know what it refers to. So there is the whole question of there will be people who will get this reference, this idea, this thing. And at first it's just okay. And then it's not until later that it's like, okay.
No, it was really fascinating to me because I was like, I know what Kavach means. Like, and I studied because when the 14th book started out, there's like this old mystery about, it's very similar to Lost in that sense. Like, you there's a mystery, but you don't know what it is. And when I heard the word Kavach, I'm like, wait a second, why is he using the word Kavach? And it was kind of referenced being correctly. Like, is there something more? And of course, just for the listeners and viewers, the word Kavach also in Hindu mythology comes from the word, Kavach there's one of the characters called Karna in the Mahabharata has this covering on his almost entire body, and it's called Kavach Kundala, which is the armor and the earrings, which is the Kundala part of it. So which is why most Indians at least are very familiar with that. And the Kavach is it's such a Marathi term, like it is ingrained into me. So that's why I was so fascinated. I've always wanted to ask this to you. So thank you for clarifying that. And of course, who knows what next Tesla wanted to do. But Sanskrit is a cool language. I do not know. My mother understands it. She can speak it to a certain degree because she learned it. But
that is my friend Chitra. She knows it, but her dad was the expert. So like actually for the tattoo, she was like, okay. She like sent me like pictures of a Post-it note, but she's like, hang on, I think I've got a dictionary. And then she went.
It's a very tough language. Like in Latin, Sanskrit, these are like the original proto languages, which are very tough. And if you speak them, it kind of I had read somewhere that it kind of rewires your brain as well by speaking them. And so that's why they're so tough to remember and speak. So if you don't speak it or don't utilize it a lot, you lose it even if you know it. So there's that. So maybe that's why Nikola Tesla was Tesla. Anyway, sir, jumping on to, I'm so sorry, I'm kind of hopping all over.
No problem.
I want to get all the questions right. I do want to ask you about your fascinating collaboration with Ray Porter. He is an amazing narrator, and whenever he does your audiobooks, there's like an extra special edition because he does these voices and mannerisms so well. So I want to ask you, what's your secret? Do you how do you get Ray Porter for your books, and how do you collaborate with him?
I am just lucky. That's how it happened. Honestly, it was sheer luck that 14 was at Audible about 10 years ago. And Ray, who had mostly been acting up until that point, and ironically, this is actually funny because we talked about this in our first couple emails, Ray is in Lost.
Oh.
Yes. There is, okay, if anyone watching, listening is a Lost fan, they did a short, like 15-minute episode, a final episode, with two guys in a warehouse, and Ben shows up and he's like, yeah, we're shutting everything down. And they're like, but no, we're making the pallets to go to the, nope, all shut down. One of those two guys is Ray Porter.
Okay, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's on, I think you can find it online. It's called like The New Guy in Charge or something like that. And it's a really quick, cute little thing where they, the way I saw it was like, okay, just in case you missed this, we did answer these, but now let's make it really blatant. And it's these two guys who are like stuck in this warehouse, and you find out that for the past like 15 years, their job has been, we peel brand name labels off cans and bottles and stuff and stick Dharma labels on it and load it on a pallet. And that's what we do. That's our job. And every day, like, the computer will like print up a new order for us, and we load it up and ship it off. And Ben shows up to shut everything down, and they're like, what are you doing? He's like, okay, look, we don't have a lot of time, so I'll answer one question from each of you. And he's like, and basically Ray goes, all right, where's all this stuff going? And Ben's like, it goes to an island. Right, but there's different coordinates every time we get a new order. Right, because the island moves. Well, how does an island, one question.
I need to watch this now.
Yes. So yeah, anyway, so he had been acting, and basically, yeah, they told me that. They told me we got this guy, Ray Porter. And I looked it up and saw, oh my God, he's that guy from the Lost short, which had literally aired like months before this. And so he was like, yeah, that's me. And he'd been in Monk, and he'd been in a couple other things. But he had just gotten into audiobooks. He had done, I believe at that point, 2 books with Jonathan Mabry. And they basically call him and say, hey, we get this book, and we don't really know what to call it. It's kind of about an apartment building. And he's like, okay. And like, it's like a mystery, sci-fi, horror thriller. And he's like, I'll do it. And so he read it and loved it. And then because that went over so well, when I did The Fold, they immediately got Ray back to do that. And I think by Paradox Bound, we had just sort of become, each other's regular job. He is amazing. We've hit the point that he has told me he loves reading my stuff because I have a very conversational writing style, that it's very easy to read my stuff. It flows organically. Even when there's abrupt sudden things, the abrupt sudden things still work for him. So he's like, so it's a pleasure reading because you can tell what these people are thinking, what they're feeling, all that. In return, I have actually gotten to do some fun things. Ray is a classic car collector, and his car shows up in Paradox Bound.
Okay.
When they basically, not giving anything away, they stop at a gas station at one point and run into one of the seekers named James. James is driving Ray Porter's car. And he has since told me this worked out kind of well for him because his ex-wife, when they were still married, he was in London with her working when she was working on Batman versus Superman. And Zack Snyder heard that Ray was an audiobook narrator from a couple people. And it turns out, this is just an odd thing, when he gets scripts, he prefers to have them read to him rather than reading them himself. So he can just sort of sit back and visualize stuff. So he basically, Ray went in thinking like, oh my God, this guy's heard of my audiobook stuff. He's like, can you read this for me? But he did it, and Zack Snyder really liked the fact that, like, oh wow, you're like doing the voices, you're leading into this, you're leading into this. And so apparently a couple months later, he went to him and showed him this picture of a comic book character and said, "What do you think this guy talks like?"
Mm-hmm.
And Ray kind of looked at it, and he has since told me he thought of the Swales from 14 and all this and how they talk when we hear their voices. And so he just started talking the way he thought this guy would probably talk. And Zach said, "Good." And a couple months later, Ray found out that he was Darkseid. So
that is so awesome. I mean, I remember seeing the movie, and I knew that he was in the movie because, you know, he was kind of, I think there was like a voiceover in the Batman vs. Superman Extended Edition where Darkseid actually did feature a little bit. But yeah, I was excited to see him. I did see it on HBO Max, and now I'm actually become a fan of that movie. I mean, just because of the scope of the movie. Like, I'm not getting into the whole Zack Snyder HBO debate. That's too much for me. But I appreciate what he was trying to do. And of course, Ray Porter, besides being an audiobook narrator, is fantastic.
Yes.
Darkseid. Like, there's that level of menace in those few small scenes where you just come across, and of course he's creepily gorgeous to look at as well. You know, just
and it's opened so many doors for him. I'm so happy for him. He was just the CW show Naomi. He was the big bad in that. He was the villain in that. And actually, I know something else, but I don't think I'm allowed to talk about it yet. I was just like, crap, wait. What did he say about this? Never mind. I don't know anything else. Forget it.
You already gave us such a cool, fascinating story about him and how he got past his dark side. I think this whole interview is just worth that, and for everything else that you have told me. All right. I know you're very busy, and I'm not going to take much of your time. I just have a couple more questions, sir, and then
sure. No.
I do want to ask you, sir, just about like what's next for you, because of course, as every fan and every book reader who loves, after they read In the Broken Room, what are you currently working on, and what is potentially going to be a next release? Can you tell us a little bit about it?
So here's how this all went down. I mentioned earlier I had this idea for like a 6-book monster series that I pitched my agent on. And what happened was, when I finished writing The Broken Room, which, keep in mind, was like a year ago, I launched right into that. And so I spent the next 5 months like working out this first draft of what was going to be the first book in another sort of loose series where like you can pick up any one of the books, but if you read all of them, you'll get a lot more, sub stuff. So I spent the first couple months working on that. And then basically, as The Broken Room was going to production, my agent came to me and said, "So look, here's the deal. I have shopped this around. There's people who are interested. No one is interested in signing a 6-book series right now.
Okay.
It's just too much, and I absolutely get that. Like I said, writing, publishing are two different things, but I 100% the idea that publishing is a business, and 6 books is a big investment. To ask someone like, nope, just give me 6 books, trust me, it'll be worth it. I totally get the meme. So I finished the first draft of that first book. And then David, my agent, and we talked a little more, and it was like, okay, so, I mean, we basically have the choice of, I think our best offer was someone was willing to do 3 of them and see how it went. So it's like, okay, so I can do 3 and possibly never finish this, depending, or I can do something else. And he and I, like, we're always, whenever we get on the phone, whenever we have lunch or something, I will just bounce ideas off him constantly. And there's one idea that I had that we had bounced again and again and again and again, but I was like, but I don't really have like, I basically have a great first act, but I don't know where it goes from there. And we were talking at one point and I said, you remember that thing that we keep going back to? I think I know where it goes now and how this works out. And he was like, okay, let me know. And I wrote up like a big outline for him and sent it to him. And he read through it and he's like, this is really good. I like this. So that is what I'm working on right now. Not really giving anything away. The basic setup for it is that it is kind of an homage in the way, you're familiar with Edgar Quintero, Meddling Kids.
Okay.
That hero, which is, it's not Scooby-Doo, but it's
Scooby-Doo-ish.
Scooby-Doo adjacent.
Yep.
I am working on something that is adjacent to a property I loved as a kid, and that I actually pitched an actual rewrite for a reboot of it recently, which got shot down. And so I was floating with Rob, okay, how would I do this as just its own thing? If I was sort of cut off from all of that mythology, how would I do this as my mythology? And like I said, I had a solid first act, but I could never really get past that. And I finally figured it out. And so the basic premise is about this guy who, when he was a little boy, he and his dad and his sister were on a whitewater rafting trip and fell through a hole in space and time and ended up in a weird valley with dinosaurs and all that sort of stuff. And 5 years later, he reappeared back on Earth. It is now 30 years after that. He's an astrophysicist, and he has figured out how to go back to rescue his sister.
Wow. Okay, that sounds amazing. Just started.
That is the setup for the book.
It's kind of like it's got Lost World vibes. It's got James Rollins's books vibes. So it'll be cool to see. And honestly, I do also hope in the future you get to write your 6-book monster book idea, just because like
so do I. I have
I love like Jeremy Robinson's Project Kaiju and all of his monster books as well. So anything to do with monsters, I'm in. It's you.
This is actually smaller scale. This was me kind of just laughing at the fact that Universal could not figure out how to do their Dark Universe thing. And so I just said, like, look, if I was going to do like just classic monsters, a Frankenstein story, a vampire story, a werewolf story, a mummy story, how would I do it? And so I just sort of started scribbling. And then at some point what's funny is I'd come up with a couple of these at different points in different ways. That I had a weird Western that I had talked to my agent about many times. And he was like, we're never going to sell a weird Western. We're not for like any, like we might be able to find a small press that might be interested in it, but we're never going to get Random House to buy a weird Western. And then I also had a vampire story, which he and my editor at Random House at Crown shot down repeatedly over like several years. Like, no vampires. Nobody wants vampires right now. No vampires. And so then when I was coming up with this whole thing, I suddenly was, wait, that would fit in here, and that would fit in here, and this could be this. And so that was actually how I originally jokingly pitched it to my agent was, hey, remember all those ideas you told me that didn't sell? What if they were all connected ideas?
That says, well, to be vampires until they become cool again, maybe you can keep them in the back burner. And weird Westerns, I agree with you, they're always a hard sell, no matter who writes them. There's like a very niche subset to readers who love weird Westerns, but somehow for traditional publishing, it just doesn't quite work.
It's a tough sell because Westerns themselves are a tough sell. Tough sell. And then when you're now trying to do a Western, like so many people don't want to do Westerns. The people who do want Westerns just want this very specific niche. And then if you're now, I want to bring in something else to it. So it's like, okay. So, but I think there's things out there that are helping. Honestly, one of my favorite comic books of the past like 10 years has been a weird Western. So did you read The Sixth Gun?
Yes, Cullen Bunn. I love that.
Yes. Oh my God. I love The Sixth Gun so much.
Yes.
I thought it was magnificent. The two things, I had been out of comics for like 10 years. And honestly, the two things that got me back into comics were The Sixth Gun and Ms. Marvel. Were the two things that got me reading comics again. But yeah, I absolutely love The Sixth Gun so much. And I'm like, so this will work. You can tell really, really cool stories like this. So anyway.
I have a comic book recommendation for you later. I'll tell it to you once.
Okay.
It's like I recently read it and it blew my mind. So I'll mention that to you, sir. And of course, last question for the day before again, like I said,
okay.
Do one thing. What have you been reading recently? Have you come across any interesting books or titles that you were like gung-ho about? And is there any shout out you'd like to give to the authors?
Oh, what have I been reading recently? I like just finished the other night Stephen Blackmore's new one, Suicide Kings. which is kind of amazing. His Eric Carter books have seriously just gotten like better and better and better as they go. That it started out very, very American Constantine, you know. I mean, there's more to it than that. It had a very noir angle, but like books like 4, 5, 6, 7, like after those, I mean, I'm not saying that the first 3 were bad. They were good books, but they were sort of their thing. Yeah. And the past ones have just been getting like so much better, so much better isn't even the right word. That sounds cruel, but just the stuff he's doing with them is just amazing to me. That the past 3, I think I have just devoured. And I think he's got 2 more that he's still contract for, I think, hope. But yeah, so I just finished Suicide Kings, Stephen Blackmore. Man, what else is in my I have a huge to be read pile right now. I read a fun little thing called 9/10, which is about I don't think it's actually out yet. I think it comes out another month. About a repo man who repossesses superhero gear.
Oh, okay, that sounds interesting.
It's very fun, and it is also like kind of noirish-y without being like horribly dark. I'm not really a big fan of like ultra dark. I don't mind noir. I hate noir that is grind everything down into the mud and make everything horrible noir. So I like that. I read, oh my God, I just blanked. I'm doing horrible with it. Okay, I'll give you this. Brian Clevenger, who writes the Atomic Robo comics, just wrote a sci-fi novel. And I think it just came out like a week ago, 2 weeks ago. And oh my God, why can I not remember the name of it? I know why, because I got to read an early version of it. And he had the series name and the book title, and I wasn't sure which was which. And so I think I kept referring to it by the series title. And it's annoying me that I can't remember, but it's just this very fun, if you like Atomic Robo, it is a very fun thing about like a smuggler in the future, and it's all about like smart guns and psychics, and it's a really great he's created this really great sci-fi world. It's very fun, where it doesn't feel like it's sort of keeping you at arm's length. He makes it all very friendly and very easy, and you're just immediately in this world with the main character, who again is this smuggler trying to figure out how she can make a ton of money off this deal that went wrong and left her with a cargo hold full of basically like intelligent smart guns. It's the best way to think of them. And it's like, okay, I can make a ton of money off these and retire. And I don't know, it's just fun. It's a fun book.
That does sound pretty cool. I'm gonna try to look it up as well. Is it nuclear? No. Nuclear Age?
No, that's Atomic Robo.
Oh.
Okay, hang on. I shall also try and pull it up real quick now. Because I think he actually just put my blurb up on Twitter the other day. So
hey, man.
Bad Moons Rising.
Bad Moons Rising. I did see that.
Okay. Yes.
Ooh, I did. Okay, I'm gonna check that out. You just gave me 2 more new books. My TBR doesn't thank you, sir, but still, I will. I will check both of those out. Bad Moons Rising. I did see that right now. The cover's pretty cool.
It's fun. It is.
It has a very comic booky cover, but it's if you have blurred it, I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah, it is definitely worth checking out. I had a lot of fun with it while I was reading it, and I think sometimes sci-fi worlds and fantasy worlds are so intent on the world building that they're kind of keeping you at arm's length, like insisting, oh well, no, you have to understand that it's not dollars, it's credits, and it's not, noodles, they're puwans, and they're not, like they want to. There's a term I've come up with recently that I like, which is world building paint. And I think it's when sometimes writers will just sort of slap this coat of paint on everything to make it look different, even though it's all the same stuff. But we have to call this by a different name. We have to call this by a different name. We have to call this by a different name. And so you're just sort of like bogged down and held back from enjoying it. because you're just trying to figure out what's happening
Mhm.
and what's going on. And this book, Bad Moon Rising, Brian Covenger's book, is so wonderful because you just slide right in. It is that warm bath that you get
Yes.
in, and there's no question what anything is. He doesn't beat you over the head with anything.
Mhm.
He doesn't change anything that doesn't need to be changed. There is no reason to call a cargo net anything except a cargo net.
Mhm.
It does not need to be the Dura fiber suspension matrix or something. So you can just get on with the story and enjoy it. And I'm not saying there are books that don't have all this stuff and do a really good job with it,
Mhm.
but I feel a lot of times it takes me a long time to get into a book because it's sort of like keeping me at arm's length by insisting, no, don't call it that. We have to say this. We have to say that. And his book was just great. And I won't give anything away, but there is one point I was reading it and I spit up my drink laughing at one point. There's like a chapter end reveal at one point, and it is just so beautifully funny and awesome, but in like a very sincere way. Like it's not
Mhm.
ha ha, like we did something dumb.
Mhm.
Like it's just brilliant. It's
All right, well, that sells it for me. I'm going to include that link in our interview below as well. And I did find out the
okay.
book, the 9/10 book as well. It's by Jeff McAfee,
Yes.
the superhero book. I'll be featuring a link to that. Stephen Blackmore, I'll include a link to because I know he has fantastic covers. I'll say this, like I haven't read any of his books, but those covers draw me in every time. So I'll include a link to that as well.
It's a great series. It's sort of like I said, it's kind of American Constantine, but it's darker and more noir, and I don't know. I just think it's wonderful. I think it is one of the best magical LAs I've ever seen, and I say that as a fan of like Richard Kadri's Sandman Slim books,
Sandman Slim, yeah,
the TV show Angel, which were all like set in demonic LA, but Steven has just done it so well and so believably, and I just think they're great.
Well, no, thank you for saying that.
I don't know why he doesn't have a show on Netflix.
He's underappreciated. I can definitely say that. Like even like I'm a fan of urban fantasy, but I haven't really read him. I know a lot of people amongst the blogger worlds. Some people like him, some people have mentioned him, but not a lot of people have read him, which is why I think it's just one of those things. Like why are certain writers so underappreciated? I think he probably is one of those.
But past that, I think the next thing up on deck for me. Oh, and that's crap. I completely forgot. I just read Sarah Kuhn's Dr. Aphra too, which I know came out a while ago, but I finally got to that. I think Josh Dysart's Brood X is next up for me. And so many things I have like one of Sherry Priest's books, The Family Plot, but it's from like a year and a half ago. I think she said 2 other books come out since then.
It's a terrific one.
I
read that. It's really good. It is at a nice gothic horror edge. She of course does horror and gothic horrors really well. So it's amazing. You won't go wrong with it.
Yeah, I have the constant problem of like, I get the to be read pile, and there's the stuff I want to read, and then the stuff that like sort of gets shoved to the top when okay, I've got this for blurbs, I have this for research, I have this, whatever. So the Murderbot books, Martha Wells, that's another one. I just picked up the next 2. Again, I'm coming very late to it. I know everyone else is miles ahead of me with those, but I read the first one actually over the holidays and loved it. I thought it was so much fun. So last time I was at Mysterious Galaxy, I just grabbed that one, and
that is those books and that world is tailor-made for a Netflix show. I feel like that can go on for a few seasons.
Yes. Oh my God,
would be amazing. But of course, Netflix doesn't listen to us. So anyways, well, Peter, thank you so very much for your time and for answering all my questions today. I want to thank you again for just explaining everything to me and for talking to me. Are there any parting words for our viewers and fans that you'd like to leave us with?
I don't know. Check out the Burger Room. I hope you like it.
All right, and I can guarantee that that if you read it, it is truly fantastic. We'll be including the links as well. There will be a Fantasy Book Critic review too. I'll be leaving review links to all of Peter's past books that I have reviewed on Fantasy Book Critic. Again, Peter, thank you so very much on this wonderful Saturday that you decided to join us. We will be hoping that your new books come out soon so we can devour them and enjoy them. And I hope you get to write all that you wish for. Thank you again, sir. Take care.
Thank you.